All right, we're going with Billy Q, my good friend. How are you, Billy?
Brendan, I am doing wonderful. Thank you so much for having me. I hope all is well with you. And yeah, let's get it started.
Hey, I always love having you on the show because because you got a microphone, you got headphones, you got a nice little studio there. Have you been doing any content from your spot?
A little bit. I have a vision of some stuff I want to add to it, but it's been a process. We've had so I had my studio almost complete, and then life happens. We ended up having our baby, and then basically I had a full gym in like another room that we had to
Yeah.
move some stuff over here. So then I was like, oh, we got to kind of switch things up. So I've redesigned it a little bit. It's almost done. We had a watch party here for these fights this past weekend. It
Nice.
went pretty smooth. And we're almost complete, but yeah, we're getting a little more content going. That's the name of the game these days,
Yeah,
so
it is.
we'll definitely keep it going. But I love your setup as well. The Fitz Nation, the
Oh yeah.
highlight, it's perfect.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it. So, real quick though, how old's the baby?
7 months old. He's about to be 8 months on the 30th.
Okay, and you're fighting in Kansas City.
Yep.
How would you describe what it's been like? Because we hear it all the time, and we talk about it on the broadcast all the time, like first fight since having a baby, whether it's a mom or a dad. For you, how have you found it to be a pro fighter and compete at the very highest level while making this huge life change?
Yeah, it's definitely impacted my training for the good and the bad. And this is actually my second fight. I had like I think a 2 month old when I was able to beat Alex Hernandez. It
Oh,
was
okay. So second fight back.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, second
Yeah.
fight. I'm looking to stay undefeated with my baby,
Yeah.
undefeated as Daddy Q. So yeah, the it has its pros and its cons. So first, the cons being the sleeping schedule is a little off. Waking up in the middle of the day, having baby duty when I feel like I should be training, or some days like when I want to just rest and do nothing. I have the baby with me, so I gotta make sure he's good to go, make sure he's on his sleeping schedule, make sure he's eating and all that stuff. Those are the very minor cons that come with it, but the pros are endless. Every single session, it's a lot more motivating. There's a lot more on my plate now. There is a new desire and a new like focus, because now it's not just about like my legacy anymore. It's also I'm fighting for my legacy, but I'm also fighting to put food on my plate for my baby. So it's very motivating to have a son. And I know people have always told me it's like the greatest thing that can ever happen to you. I completely agree with that. I'm still very new in the game, but he's the best thing that's ever happened to me, and I bring a lot of the motivation now comes from him now.
Yeah. That's good to hear, man. I think that a lot of people can identify that with that, whether you're a professional athlete or not. But like, there's sometimes like, so I have a 10-month-old as well,
Oh
and
wow.
a 7-year old. So I've gone through it one time, but it doesn't disappear the fact that you have to be a father and be a husband when you feel like, ah, gosh, I should be working on this. I should be working on this. I should be working
Yeah.
on this. And you always have to like constantly remind yourself of just like, when it's all over, these are the people that are going to be here.
Yeah.
You know what I
Yeah,
mean? Like,
exactly. And there's like a fine line between, all right, I'm doing all this for my baby and for my wife and for my family, but then it's also like you don't want to spend time away from them doing all this stuff. So
yeah,
there's a fine line, and uh, there's a balance that you have to find in that, because
yeah,
I'm very lucky because my gym's 5 miles down the road. I got two different gyms I go to. They're both within 15 minutes of me, so I'm not driving around all day. I go right from my gym. I come right home. I train in the morning. I train at night, and I'm home during the day for most days. So I'm very blessed to be able to spend a lot of time with him in these early days.
yeah,
The early part of his life, because everyone says like, oh, that goes so fast. And so I'm very lucky to be in the position I'm in, and I think I did it kind of the right way. If it was up to my wife, we would have got married, 5 years ago. We just celebrated our second anniversary,
okay,
but we've been together for almost 10 years. So,
yeah,
I tell her good things come to those who wait. She would have liked to have gotten married years ago, but I waited. We had our baby, and now I'm in the UFC, and things are going really good. We have our own house. We have a little family, so
Yeah.
it all worked out in the end.
We did the same thing. I met my wife in '04. We didn't get married until 2012. And I
There
was
you
like,
go.
I didn't want to I didn't want to not be ready from a
Yeah.
budget standpoint, really. Like I wanted to do
Yeah.
things the way that we wanted to do it. So yeah, there you go. All right. I want to take you back because I had you on the show a while ago, and a couple of things that stood out to me were kind of the way that you systematically achieved some of your goals and like have obviously new goals set up. But for those who don't know, Billy, not a standout athlete in high school, right? You played hockey, played some sports.
Yeah.
Kind of didn't know where you were going in life after high school. You found your way down to Florida, and then you're like putting everything into becoming an MMA fighter and trying to make it to the UFC. And I remember you telling me about when you were lying at night with like no kind of friends, family around and all that other stuff, working at a restaurant, and you're just like, how am I going to make this happen? Can you put me back in your shoes and explain and kind of remember what you were thinking about your life at that point?
Yeah, absolutely. It was, and I think we talked about this last time. It was a real like burn the boat situation where I moved to Florida, wasn't a good athlete at all. I was already 21 years old and was an 0-1 amateur fighter. And, this is after kind of figuring out this is what I want to do with my life. But understanding the odds were against me, being a realist, I understood you're 21 years old. You're not like a freak athlete. You're not even that good of an athlete. You're like a middle of the road athlete. So I definitely remember pretty clearly moving to Tampa, leaving my friends, leaving all my family behind, leaving everything I had to basically get rid of what I thought were distractions and focus on, all right, if you're going to try to get to the UFC, if you're going to put everything you have into this, you're going to have to get rid of anything that could distract you or could stop you from getting to that point. So I decided in 2010, I moved to Tampa. I didn't have a job. I didn't have anything else. I had my associate's degree, and I decided not to go to finish my 4-year degree of college, and just decided this is going to be what you're going to focus on. Let's see how these next couple of years go and go from there and put everything you have into this. So I was working, I got a job serving tables. Every day I would train all day. I would work at night, make just enough money to get by. And all my efforts went into getting into the first biggest goal that I had was to get into the UFC. And that took from 2010 to 2019. So it took 9 years. And it took a brief stint on The Ultimate Fighter where I was so close, like 2015. All things happen for a reason. Thank God I didn't get in then because I was not ready for the UFC at that point. But these little ups and downs along the way, torn ACL, a broken hand, multiple stitches, black eyes still to this day every week. And it's great to talk to guys like you and have these opportunities to look back on how far I've actually come because I'm grateful for it. And it's just such a long drawn out journey. And my first big goal was to get in the UFC. We made that happen in 2019. You were commentating Contender Series and was able to knock down the doors, finally get in the UFC. And then everything switched where it was like, your main goal is to get in the UFC. And now it's like, all right, now you reach that goal. Now it's like, it opens up a brand new set of goals of win your first fight, get a finish, get a performance of the night bonus, talk to Joe Rogan, be on a pay-per-view main card, fight at Madison Square Garden. Now it's coming down to beat a ranked opponent, get in the top 15, get in the top 10, get in the top 5, fight for a championship, win a championship, and then all these other financial goals on the other side. So it took me, the biggest goal was to get in the UFC, and it was a huge landmark and a huge stepping stone. And now, even since I've talked to you last, the goals have just gotten bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger.
Yeah, as they should. You've had success along the way. And I think your approach is a big reason why. Now, when you were deciding in your early 20s, like you said, I had decided this is what I want to try to do. Why do you think you came to that? Like, if you were a realist, like, did you decide to do this because you thought it was a way to get rich and and make a lot of money and be kind of a big star someday? Why did you really pursue fighting to the level that you did?
Yeah, so a big part of it was I knew I never wanted to work for someone in terms of like I didn't want like an office job, having my boss come up to me every day, why didn't you do this, that kind of thing. Like I didn't want a traditional job. I got my business degree at the community college right down the street from where I grew up in Buffalo, and I still, after getting a pretty general business degree, I still didn't know exactly what I wanted to do, but I know I wanted to pursue something that I enjoy doing every single day. So basically, one of those situations where it was like, find something that doesn't feel like work, that you could make some money, but it doesn't feel like it. It's something that like it's almost like a hobby. Like find a hobby, and then I enjoyed the UFC. I liked watching the UFC, but for a while I kind of battled that it's unrealistic. You know what I mean? Like the guys who are getting in the UFC are guys who have been kickboxing and doing jiu-jitsu for their whole lives. So I battled with that for a while because I started watching The Ultimate Fighter when I was 16, and I was like, oh man, this is really cool, but it's not really, even back then it wasn't really a job. It was they only had a few pay-per-views a year. You weren't seeing the Conor McGregors and these huge stars making all this money. So I battled with that for a while until I got my associate's degree. I was like, all right, you don't know what you like to do in terms of business, but you know what you like to train, and you like to compete. You're a competitor and you want to work for yourselves. So it makes sense to let's just go all in on something that you like to do. If it works out, you're going to be where you are at now. You know what I mean? Like if you work out, it's going to be this. It's going to be, you make your own schedule. You don't necessarily have a boss. Dana White's the man. Like he's a cool guy. It doesn't feel like I have a boss, and you can make your own schedule. I wake up, I decide what I want to do. I get to do boxing, kickboxing, jiu-jitsu, wrestling, things that I like to do anyway, competing sports. And that's kind of how I figured out, let's go after something that you really like to do. And if worse comes to worse, you can just do what you've been doing anyway.
Yeah. Like the realism thing is a huge thing. Like it wasn't realistic, but then once you shifted your mindset and it became realistic, sure enough, like you turned it into a reality. When did that shift happen for you? Like, do you remember, or like in how you think about things now? Because some people might probably still pull down on your goals. When you say, I want to be a champion, they might go, whoa, okay, that's, shooting for the moon a little too much. Let's pull it back. But it's like, you can't get there. The only people who get there are the ones who think like that.
Yeah, that shift kind of happened, which is I always tell people this, even at the gym, because people are still at the gym that I'm at. My coach was talking about this yesterday. He was like, guys, when Billy came here, he wasn't the guy that he is now.
Yeah.
He had to work for it every single day, took his beatings, and ended up in that position. So I think that shift kind of happened, it was a cool thing where when I first started training, I was like, just put everything you got into this. Maybe you could make make enough money where you could pay your bills. And if not, you can open up a gym and teach other people how to do it. Luckily, in 2009 or 2010, when I moved to Tampa, I made the commitment. I'm like, I want to get to the UFC. The popularity of the UFC was on like the same path that I was on. Like I didn't even know if you could make a career out of the UFC, but week in and week out, the UFC got a little more popular. I got a little bit better. The UFC got more popular. I got more better. People started making more money. I kept on that path where I just knew, I'm like, just keep winning fights, keep training, don't party, don't waste any of this time, because I already knew it was against
Clock
the clock.
was ticking a bit.
I'm still against the clock, right? And so luckily for me, it was motivating because I would go to a training session and then Saturday would come around and there'd be a big UFC fight. And then it was getting more popularity, and then I would have another fight, and then they would sign like the Reebok deal or the Fox deal, and I'm seeing all these things happening, and that was a big part of my motivation too, because I'm like, I kind of had that same vision that Dana White had, where it was like they have something special here. There's two people fighting, there's no rules, people love it. It's not like boxing where if you're a better boxer than me, you're going to outbox me and beat me. It's like, okay, you're a better boxer than me. I'm going to try to take you down. I'm going to land a low kick on you. I'm going to mix up my game, mix up my style. So I kind of had that same vision of when I started training and started watching the UFC. I was like, man, this is gonna blow up, and I'm gonna blow up. And sure enough, by the time I got in the UFC, they already did they already sold the UFC for like 4 point whatever
Yep.
billion.
Yep.
They're doing fights almost every weekend.
Yeah.
And I got in right at the perfect timing.
Um, yeah, you bring up a good point on that because it's very refreshing to be in a sector business wise that's growing because there's not a lot of other things that are growing at this rate, at the
Yeah.
rate that the UFC has been growing. Like I got into the UFC and I remember a friend, that I worked with at ESPN, I just got laid off from ESPN. And I was just like, yeah, I got this opportunity with the UFC. And he's just like, man, that's perfect. He's like, they're about to take off. It's a good time. It's a good time for them. But you mentioned earlier that when you were on The Ultimate Fighter, thank God you didn't get in. But I bet at the time you wished you got in. How do you grapple with the mindset from when you're on the way? Like you said, it's a 9-year journey to get to the UFC for you. But I bet you felt like you were ready for 7 of those years or like 6 of those years. How did you deal with that? Because that's really challenging when you think you're ready for something, but the rest of the world's telling you you're not yet or hasn't given you the opportunity.
Yeah, and obviously my perspective changed completely because in 2015 I was there in the house. I felt like I was good enough to win the whole show and to get in the UFC and start my path to becoming a star. Check that UFC goal off the list right then and there. And after they basically sent me a letter, tough break. They sent me a few bucks. I think it was like $500, and they're like, and it was. I still have the letter. We've talked about my vision board.
Yeah.
I still have the letter that they sent me that were like, you're not good enough yet, and it was heartbreaking. It was. I put everything I have into this, and they're like, just a simple letter. Hey, now tough break. You're not there yet. And I think a lot of people, they always ask me like, oh man, you didn't quit then. What kept you going? And I think a lot of that was I put everything I have into it already. So I really didn't have a backup plan. I didn't have like, oh, if this doesn't work out, go work for your dad or go work for whoever. I didn't have that. So it was as heartbreaking as it was. I took the good from it. And the good was, all right, you were just on a TV show. You got some exposure. You got your ass kicked, but take what you want, take what you can from it. You just learned from, one of the best fighters ever, Uriah Faber. You were right there with Conor McGregor. You had dinner with Dana White. Take those opportunities and use it. Like what happened in your fight? Okay, I fought a really big, strong wrestler. You better work on your strength and conditioning. You better work on your wrestling. You better work on all these things. And as heartbreaking as I was then, what I've come to realize at this point in my life, that one was a real tough one. And then a couple of years later, when I tore my ACL, again, it was the same feeling of like, this thing might not ever happen. This goal of yours, this thing that you set out for, this move to Tampa in 2010 might not ever work for you. And I thought about I always think about both those things now, and those were the two hardest things that I had to deal with. Now are probably the best things that ever happened to me from what I learned from it. Like The Ultimate Fighter, I took so many things away from it that I learned from it and built on, and I'm at now. And the same thing with the torn ACL was, let's properly heal this the right way. And the first thing that I was able to do after the torn ACL was I was able to start boxing, and I just put all my effort. I'm like, all right, your jiu-jitsu and grappling's pretty good right now, but let's put a full year into just boxing and striking, and my striking got tremendously better from that. So the two worst things that happened to me ended up being the two best things that happened to me.
Yeah, I saw a phrase recently. It was from an actor. It was from Michael Caine, and he was saying the phrase that he learned on stage is use the difficulty. And it was some like improv scene where like he was supposed to walk into this room and there was a chair in the way. And then like he kind of froze up. He didn't really know what to do. And somebody else said, if it's a comedy, trip over it. If it's a drama, pick up the chair and slam it. Use the difficulty, like whether it's in whatever realm you can. And in life, you certainly can always use a difficult moment to grow from it. I mean, we hear it countless times, but I just think it's valuable for people to hear it in all different aspects. For you, I think that's interesting that your two probably greatest chapters in terms of allowing you to grow were the two toughest moments in the moment for you.
Yeah. And if you would have told me in those moments. And actually, I had a buddy when I tore my ACL. He would always tell me, he's like, "Man, this is gonna be the best thing that ever happened to you." And I would kind of like laugh about it, but I'm in my head, I'm like, how the hell is taking a year off when I'm already? I was 29. How is taking a year off gonna be good for me? You know what I mean? Like you just don't see the vision until it's all said and done. And even now, when anything bad happens to me, it's like, all right, well, you're gonna learn from this, and now you've gone through that experience, so you're gonna be stronger from it. And it's a very important thing to try to remember, even though obviously when really bad things happen to you, it's very hard to vision it like that.
Yeah. When did you start writing down goals?
I started writing down goals in right after I moved here. I want to say like 2011, and that was something that my one of my biggest mentors, my head coach Matt Arroyo, who's coached me in every single fight that I've had. He'll be in my corner April 15th. He was in my corner all these fights. He's real big on reading books and like motivational stuff. And I'm sure we mentioned this the last time, but he recommended me reading a book called The Compound Effect by Darren Hardy. Excellent book. I suggest it to anyone. It's an easy read, and it just kind of talks about how, like when you write your goals out, and every day, we have these little, like every single day we do little things, and each little thing is either going to get us a little bit closer to our goal, or it's going to put us a little bit further away from our goal. And I know writing down your goals, if I wake up, like I have my goals, hold on, I just randomly have these, I'm in my office, so I have my goals for this year all written out. I don't want to go over too many of them, but these are my goals for this year.
That's a lot of them, dude.
Yeah, they're all like little ones and different, like, family stuff, social media, content stuff that we're working on right now. And writing those goals out and looking at them every single day. All right, what can I do today to get one step closer to that goal? Like what can I do today? One step closer. And those little tiny changes every single day. The compound effect basically talks about how those little things every single day compound into huge, massive results, even though you're not going to see them today necessarily. When the time comes and you put all this effort into reaching those goals, that's how the universe kind of rewards you. And you hate to do it, but you see it like in a negative aspect too. Like, so let's say every single day, instead of going for a walk every single day, I eat an ice cream sandwich every single day. It's not going to be a big deal day one or day two or day three. But if you go 500 days in a row of just eating ice cream sandwiches, who knows what the results are going to be? You're going to be fat. You're going to be overweight. You're going to have high blood pressure. The same thing with I obviously focus on the positive ones of you go for a, you train martial arts every single day, even little bits, like when you don't want to train, when you don't feel like you can, that turns into going from 2010 to not knowing anything about martial arts to being, almost a household name in the UFC, 5-2, 4 finishes, working on another contract with the UFC, fighting the number 15 top guy in the world, who, by the way, was knocking people out in the UFC before I even started training. So it's just crazy how I recommend it to everyone. Write your goals out. Look at them over every day. I look at them almost every single day, and I'm always working towards it. I'm on autopilot now of like every day I know what I have to do to get to that next set of goals that I've set for myself.
I remember in that book, they used the example of like 3 guys, and one guy who just kind of does the same thing, another guy who like puts away like $50 a day or whatever it is. And then another guy who's just like, he wants to live his life. He's going to buy a big screen TV, and he's a foodie, and and it's just like, it shows you the graph. This guy's now making this much more money. This guy now lost this much money. It's like dealing with health issues. Another book, Billy, that you'd like, if you haven't read it already, Atomic Habits by James Clear. Have you read that one?
Yes, I've not read it, and I've seen so many people have recommended it. Maybe that might be my next book. I've been working on some other stuff outside of reading it, but man, that's one of them that has been recommended to me so many times.
It's honestly, it's a lot of it is the similar vein of the compound effect, but it's just like an updated, it's the popular version of now. You know what I mean? James Clear, like, I
love that, and that's like the same thing. Like you were saying, a lot of it might be very similar, and I think of the same thing when I go to like a martial arts seminar or something like that, where a lot of it's going to be stuff that you should already know, or maybe you already do know, or maybe it's all fresh. But if you could just take one little thing from a
Yes.
book or a seminar, and that one little thing could change your life. So I'm always about doing that and reading that. I'll definitely look into that book.
Yeah. I hear you, man. Like I was looking over something on YouTube the other day, and it was just like how to make things better or whatever. And it was like, yeah, I know, optimize this. And it was like one little thing on how you can make thumbnails better. And I was like, boom, that was worth it.
That's
It's worth
it.
the whole half
Yeah,
hour watching that, you know?
exactly.
But like when you grew up, I feel like we grew up pretty similar, Northeast, like middle class, playing hockey. I would imagine also people from the Northeast are pretty similar, no matter if you're from like Massachusetts, New York, whatever.
Yeah.
Like the whole motivational thing, right? The whole like self-help thing and reading the compound effect and writing out your goals. That does not really come natural to people from the Northeast, does it? Like you probably didn't come from a family like that, or like were classified like that. Do you remember like shifting your personality and being like, wow, this is different. Like I'm becoming a different person. This like, and then you like it, but
Yeah, well, so I knew growing up, like you, I'm sure, everyone that like I was around, like all like the adults, like my dad, for example, I was thinking about this the other day. Like I never saw my dad like sitting still. Like I've seen him maybe laying on the couch one time in my whole life. Like every single day, he wakes up at like 4 a.m., gets after it, like goes to work, he opens up my family diner, goes to his job, works there all day, is running around. Every time you're talking, like every time I call him on the phone, oh, I'm busting my ass, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. So like a lot of people always had that mentality, which I've always had that. Like I was always motivated by people like that. Most of the guys in my life were like that. We're hardworking, blue collar, to the grind. So I had a little bit of that in me. But what I was lacking was the information. I was lacking the, what you got to do to get there, but it's how do you get there is the thing. And that's where I think the shift happened when I moved to Florida and I met Matt, my trainer, Matt Arroyo. He was a big part of it. And he was the one that, it was the first time I met someone that was like in the UFC. So it was kind of the first time I met someone that was like, he had what I want. How did he get there? You know what I mean? And so luckily for me, because I see this all the time where guys are like good friends with their coach and like they go out and drink together and if they don't want to train, their coach is okay with that. We've always had like a mutual respect for each other, but it's always been that he's the coach and I'm the student. Still to this day, I'm 34 now. I met him when I was 21. So I think that was important that I found the right person. And when I realized that he knew how to get me to where I was at, then I finally found like that inspiration really. Because when I was like in high school, the teachers that like they didn't really have what I wanted and they weren't really showing me what I needed to get to where I needed to go because I wasn't interested in it. So I respected the teachers, but they were giving me information that I didn't really use, that I knew I didn't really need. But it was until that the shift where I understood you got to work hard to get where you want to go. We live in in capitalism. It's you work for your money, and I get all that. But then it was like, all right, well, how do you get there? Like you don't know anyone. I didn't know anyone at my first gym that was in the UFC. So training every day was good, and they were giving me really good stuff. But I didn't focus and lock in on it until I met someone that was like, this is how I got to the UFC. This is what I did. On the side of it, I read these books, I do this kind of stuff, I do this type of training, and I was all in from that point. I was like, all right, you know how to get to the UFC, you know how to get me to the UFC, you know how to get on the Ultimate Fighter. Whatever I need to do to get there, this guy can give me the information. So pay attention because I had the work ethic already, but I needed that. I needed someone to kind of guide me that I trusted and I would actually listen to because I knew he had what I wanted.
Yeah, I think it's a big change in just the genre of self-help and motivating and all that. Like it exists more than it did. Like obviously we always knew hardworking people, but they almost would put a cap on it. Be like, oh, I'm a hardworking teacher and I'm just always going to be a teacher. And nowadays it's like people always want more and they can achieve more and there's more information on how to get more. Yeah, for you, what's the biggest thing you think, just a couple more questions.
Yeah.
What's the biggest thing you think you've changed recently that has helped you?
Do you mean in terms of like career wise
I mean,
or
anything. It could be anything, but
what I've changed more?
or like, what's the most recent thing you've learned that you're really like, oh, this is going to help me a lot.
That's a good question. Let me see here. Let me think. So the thing that has helped me. So something that I've really been focusing on now, because I'm 34. Like I'm not like it's a young man sport,
Hmm.
and I've kind of what I've been focusing more on is longevity. So I I can still like compete with the guys at my gym who are like 20, 20, 21, 22, 23, but I don't try to I don't try to do everything that they're going to do because I know I might be a little more sore the next day. So
Yeah.
I've been focusing a lot more on um basically not trying to avoiding breaking my body, but still doing what needs to be done. For example, maybe like instead of going and trying to run like 10 miles and as fast as I can, I'll do a different form of conditioning. Maybe I'll do an airdyne bike, and maybe I'll do a lot more technical stuff that will help my body make it these next 5-6 years of
Yeah.
fighting, as opposed to when I was 21, it was like, let's just go until the wheels fall off. Let's go in, and I still have guys do it, and I try to tell them to pump the brakes because if you get injured every other training camp, you're not going to last that long. And a lot of guys, I love David Goggins. He's motivated me so much. I've read his books already, and but with him, it's like he'll keep going until his knees will break and he'll
Keep
break
going after that.
and then he'll be in the hospital
He'll
and run
duct
back
tape his
and
knees together and he'll run another 30 miles. It's crazy.
and I love that mentality, but in the sport that we're in, you have a long road to the UFC, and that's why I think most guys in the UFC in like the top 10, top 15 are usually 30, 31, 32, 33, 34. The reason why it's because you need to have a X amount of amateur fights, you need X amount of pro fights. In that journey, you're going to have injuries. Some injuries are a year long. Sometimes you'll do 3 training camps and a guy will pull out, and then you'll get hurt, and then they'll get hurt, and then you'll have to wait longer, and then all these things happen. So what I've really focused on, this is probably the last couple of years, it's make it to the dance close to 100%, because sometimes you train so hard and you do all these things and you go into the fight 50%, and then you might take a loss, or you don't make it to the fight and you get hurt, and then it prolongs that. So I've gotten a lot better at my training camps, and instead of doing those extra rounds where you might not perform, you're leading yourself to injury. It's a lot of what I'm focusing now is do what you have to do for the fight, but don't overdo it. And it's obviously a very thin line, but it's if in terms of David Goggins, go run the marathon, but then take a couple days off. Don't run another marathon and another marathon until you tear your ACLs and you're out for a year.
Right. Well, I always think I'm super looking forward to seeing you in Kansas City, dude. That's going to be an awesome fight against
Thanks,
Edson.
man. It's going to be good.
Edson Barboza. That's the co-main, right? I think as it stands right now.
Yeah. So what I was told was there's been a lot of back and forth. So my manager told me Edson Barboza co-main event. I said, bet, let's do it.
Yeah.
The UFC came out here and they did all this filming, like co-main event, blah, 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 blah. And I was like, all right, bet. Then it was in the second spot. Then they put that Ian Kushilaba, I believe that's how you say his name, versus Tanner Bozer. And they put him on there, I think on like the ESPN thing. And I was like, oh man, that's weird. Like, why would they do me like that? And then I was thinking, maybe it's because they booked my fight before the Holloway fight, so maybe they don't want back-to-back featherweight fights. And then someone messaged me who's real close to the ESPN. I don't want to give his name away, but he said that he's like, hey man, I know you might be worried, but I think you're still in the co-main event. So he said that ESPN might have got it wrong because like according to the UFC and the TV, that's the co-main event. So I hope it is. I think it should be. If not, they're still paying me the same amount. Right. It'll just give me another reason to have a chip on my shoulder. Like, go out there and go stick it to them, prove it to them that it should be the co-main event. So either way, I think it's the co-main event. But if not, more motivation for me.
I have the card in front of me right now, sent from the UFC.
Okay.
You're the co-main event.
There you go.
On my card right now. Obviously,
Breaking news.
It's always subject to change. But
Yes.
right now, I have Edson Barboza, Billy Quarantillo, co-main event.
There it is. And that's what, and I was thinking that, I'm like, they sent the UFC crew out here. Like, why would they, you know what I mean? Like,
if they gave you a real feature like that,
yeah,
they're not going to move it for a silly reason.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Else,
That's what my boy Big Marcel. I think he got this one wrong. I love Big Marcel. He's the guy, man. He always has like the list, and he always gets it wrong. And someone else told me, I was like, oh man, I gotta tell Marcel this. But yeah, man, I can't wait. Kansas City, and I feel like I had my opportunity against Shane Burgos. That was my first top 15 fight, Madison Square Garden.
Yeah.
Chopped my leg up early, slowed me down. He got a decision win. That was my first opportunity at this. Battled back, beat Alex Hernandez, and then I called out Barboza, called my shot, and they're giving me the second opportunity at it, so I can't let this one slip away. I'm going to do everything I can do to do what I got to do to win this fight and to keep moving up the rankings this next year.
Here's another thing, Billy, and I will get you out of here on this. I always think about what you told me the last time we did a podcast, when you always want to make your fights exciting. It's one of the reasons why fans love you so much, is your fights are always exciting. And you told me, I don't want to waste any opportunities out there, because you know now you might fight once a year, maybe twice, at best probably 3. You know, and especially as you're climbing the rankings and you're like, yeah, I don't want to have that fight where you're like, you won, but they didn't give you the mic and nobody remembers it, because there are so many of those fights now that I've been calling fights for like 5+ years. It's like, man, fights will go by. I've even had main events now where I'm just like, oh, I called that fight. I don't remember it at all, you know, because it was a 5-rounder and whatever. And like, there we go. It's off into the distance, and you always deliver memorable fights. It's so much fun to watch. So I'm glad I'm on the call for this one, man. It's going to be fun.
Awesome, man. I can't wait to see you out there, brother. It's going to be a great fight. And that's my style. I'm going to make it as exciting as possible. Edson Barboza has some pretty exciting fights too.
Yes, he does.
I've been watching his highlights, and I'm like, damn, man, this is going to be this is going to be a violent fight, and I can't wait for it.
Awesome, Billy. Thanks for coming on the show, man. Always appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, man. I'll see you in Kansas City.
Thanks for watching Fitz Nation on the UFC Fight Pass YouTube channel. You know, my bosses would love it if you hit that UFC Fight Pass logo and subscribe to the channel. Thanks, and I'll see you next time.